normally start with ACDC's, some intro song, but we've already been chatting. Let's just get going. So, welcome everybody. I see the participant count climbing. We've got a really special guest today, guys. Pat Hiban's a friend of mine, and he's a mentor, and he's just a leader, and he understands big picture, but he also knows what it takes to succeed. So as a child, he was actually labeled with learning disabilities and some speech deficiencies, and clearly you've overcome it. You communicate well today, but the point there is just that you didn't wake up on third base with a 90-foot walk into home, and as a winner you had to succeed in spite of. Fourth string lacrosse player, so you were crushing it early on. You got a degree in sociology, and you attempted to get some jobs, and the way I understand it is you were turned down and didn't capture the job, your dream job, so defaulted to real estate on some level, or chose real estate in a non traditional sense. And right out of school, and first year you killed it. You made $13,200 selling 6 condos, a house, and 3 mobile homes. I like your diversity, though. You weren't afraid to tailor your business.
Junkyard dog, man.
That's it. You got to fight the fight. But through consistent application of strategies and tenacity, at one point in 2004, you were the #1 agent for RE/MAX worldwide. Remarkable. And then you migrated to Keller Williams, which I'm proud of and excited about, and became the #1 agent in Keller Williams 2 short years later. That was globally. Pretty remarkable. In fact, you also hold the title as only a handful of people are considered billion-dollar agents, having sold over 4,000 homes and $1 billion in real estate. You're an acclaimed author. 6 Steps to 7 Figures. Can't wait to hear a little bit about that and how, timeless, there it is, 6 Steps to 7 Figures. That can be found on Amazon, I'm certain.
Yes.
Yeah, and you also just co-wrote Tribe of Millionaires with some really remarkable people out of our GoBundance tribe. So you founded the GoBundance, you co-founded GoBundance, which is a men's business mastermind, which has grown to over 200 active members. And the goal there is healthy, wealthy, amazing, outgoing individuals who lead epic lives. And so I could keep going. You also hosted a podcast. Did I read it correctly? You have, how many episodes did you record of the Rockstar?
I did 850.
Holy mackerel. Yeah, Robert Kiyosaki, Barbara Corcoran, Grant Cardone. I mean, you've had you've had some of the biggest names anywhere on that. I'd love to hear about that at some point. And you're philanthropic. You have a heart for kids with incarcerated parents, Make-A-Wish Foundation, and you also are actively involved with One Life Fully Lived, which is a near and dear charity to our brothers in the GoBundance tribe. So without further ado, maybe just start by sharing a little bit about your childhood, how you grew up, what shaped your thinking, and how did you evolve into the person you are today?
Yeah, that's interesting, right? I mean, so I grew up in Columbia, Maryland, which is it's like 20 minutes outside of, say, Baltimore City, and about 45 minutes outside of Washington, D.C. So it's a suburb of both. My parents divorced when I was 12. I have 4 other siblings, so there was 5 of us. 2 were adopted and 3 were natural. I have a sister that was adopted from Taipei, Taiwan, and I have a brother that was a Cherokee Indian, and so it's kind of and we're all within like 6.5, 7 years of each other. So it was quite in my mind, it was chaotic, right? So I think I got some of the survivalist mentality from just being in that, just being in the mix. And my mom was a school teacher, so we essentially after the breakup kind of raised ourselves to a degree, and then I went to college. Like the thing says, I did okay. I passed, right? I got a 2.3, and my degree was sociology, just because, I only had 4 years. I wasn't like on a 5 or 6 year plan with money and stuff like that. So I picked whatever I could get out with the fastest, and that was sociology. There's only 10 classes required So I did that, and then I was going to be a probation officer, and the line was too long. It was like, it was going to take like a year and a half, and blah blah blah. So somehow, I don't know, somebody told me, hey, you can make a lot of money selling real estate. So I got my real estate license, and that was it, man. It was not conscious at all. It was almost unconscious. It was like the universe. I never really said, oh, I love fireplaces and I love kitchens and I have this attention to detail. And I just don't, have all that, any of that shit for houses. I can't even tell, when I could go to somebody's house today and then show up a month later and they have a new kitchen and I won't notice. You know what I mean? So it wasn't like I was born to be an agent. But I did like money, and I did like people. And I think the combination of those two things helped make me a good real estate agent.
Yeah. Well, there's no doubt about that. Both are certainly in high demand in the career choice we have. I bet if we polled the audience, everybody on this call, I wonder how many of would say, when they were 15, 20, even early 20s would say, my destiny is to be a realtor. And there are a lot of real estate agents on this call, but I think it's almost a calling, and a lot of us do default. So give us a little history about your ramp up and your maybe secrets to success in the real estate industry early on. And so we're talking, what year did you start? Give us some.
Yeah. So I got licensed in November '87, and so, my first year, 2 years, I kind of did what I was told, which was do floor duty, which is where you sit there like you're basically the receptionist, because they save money and don't have a receptionist. So you're the receptionist. You do everything, scheduled appointments on other agents' listings, and greeted people at the door and signed for packages and stuff like that. But then if somebody called in and said, how much is the house on, there was no cell phone, so agents couldn't hoard their own leads. So somebody called on a house, it had the office number on it, and that was the only number on it. And so then you got it, and you're like, hey, that house is 80,000. Would you like to see it? Blah blah blah. So that's pretty much how I got all my leads. And then about 3 years in, I took Floyd Wickman's Sweat Hogs class, and it really shifted my mind in the ability to be a listing agent, because I was really, like I said, I was a junkyard dog. I just took what I could get, and pretty much what you could get is buyers, right? It's like 80% buyers, 20% listings if I got lucky. But it wasn't by design. And Floyd taught me, you want to make this a business by design. So you want to be a listing agent. And the way you got to do that is you just have to, sit in the corner and do what I tell you. And he basically told me to sit in the corner and call down through a directory and just cold call everybody on certain streets every single day. And so I did. And this was my third year in the business. And my second year in business, I made 24 grand. And then my third year in business, I made 83, which was 1990. It was decent money back then. And then from there, it just went up and up and up. And then I started building a team. And then from there, it just kind of, snowballed, right?
Yeah.
And I was always a listing agent. It was almost like that day. As soon as I started getting 3 or 4 listings, I was like, well, it's silly for me to even mess with the old way, because I was like, this is just logically, it just made sense to me, because I could get a decent price house put on the market, and I have like 10,000 agents working for me all of a sudden, trying to sell this listing, and I didn't have to do anything. And I just felt so much more in control, such power in being the listing agent versus working with buyers. And so then I just built a team based on listings, where I was in control of all the listings at all times. And then, added buyer agents and staff and couriers. And then we started doing television commercials, which are all on, if you go to youtube.com/Pat Hiban, there's all these old commercials that we did. We probably had 10 different commercials, just funny commercials. Kind of became a local celebrity, a household name, um, through local cable, and just always, you know, 60 to 65% listings throughout, pretty much throughout my career since that day forward, you know.
So fast forward to today, if you were starting out and you're brand new, and I know there's some people on this call, I'm sure that are inside of a year or two experience in the industry, what would you do differently and what would you have done sooner? And maybe those.
Well, well, I mean, that's kind of going with the same theme, right? Like there was a guy that came on my show. I can't remember his name. He was a young guy. He was a telemarketer. He was making like 40 grand a year telemarketing, customer service, and he got his license, and he got an email that said, "You have, here's your license via email." And I was like, "So what'd you do?" He said, I left my job at like 11 o'clock, didn't come back, and I went right to work." And I said, what you mean you went to the office, you got your business cards made, you got your, you know, desk or whatever, you got acquainted? He said, "No, I went straight to a certain neighborhood and started knocking on doors, telling everybody I just got my license and did they need an agent." And I was like, wow, I wish kind of everybody thought like that, right? Like the key is not to go get it together. It's not ready, aim, fire. It's This guy was like fire, ready, aim, and he just went fire, fire, fired. And at the time of the interview, he had like 17 listings, and he was like in the active listings. It was like his second year in business. I mean, he basically only did listings, and I was like, well, that's really, I'd love it if every agent just started out like thinking to themselves, this is how I'm supposed to do it.
Yeah, right on, right on. Yeah, and so given today, the circumstances we're in, how is your, so what do you, how about this question? What do you do today? I know you had your podcast, you mentioned you've sold that, and um, you've created this outcome that you have choices. What does a day in the life look like, and what do you think about the COVID scenarios we're dealing with, especially as an industry, and what would you do in light of that?
Crazy. I mean, it's changing everything, right? Like everything has changed. I think this is going to change everything more than any, recession we've been in. More when 9/11 happened, everything changed in our minds of how we viewed terrorism. When Columbine happened, everything changed in our minds of how we viewed safety of schools. Like you can't rethink anything, right? It's changed permanently, and I think this has changed things permanently. Don't know the results yet, but I mean, I think that in a positive sense, it's going to make people save more money and be more conservative, because the whole grandfather cliche of save for a rainy day is save for a rainy year, right? And so to answer your question in more detail, so what happened was in 2010, 2000, let's say 8, like the market just started tanking. I had this massive team, massive amount of square feet, all this stuff. And so I had a title company and a mortgage company, and the mortgage company wanted me to put in $1 million cash, in case loans went bad. The title company wanted me to, guarantee a certain amount of transactions a month, which I couldn't guarantee. So both of those closed. Um, and then I started downsizing my team. I took it from like 52 people that were in our space all the way down to like 11 in a period of like 3 years. And then in 2010, that's when I started writing my book, 6 Steps to 7 Figures. And I was writing about all the experiences of what I went through going up and then back down. And then, I went on book tour, and I did 53 Keller Williams offices in 7 months. I went all over the country. And then that got released. And then I just became like a full-time investor, more or less. I just started like selling things and then buying things and then selling things and then buying things. And I got into some angel investing, invested in a couple of companies. A couple of them went belly up. A couple of them, made millions. Um, and I bought a bunch of real estate, bunch of like little single family onesie twosies. I bought a bunch of apartment buildings and I bought a shopping center, and and then I did that, and then I started selling some of them about a year ago, and then recently with the COVID, I was like in two big deals that I was excited about before the COVID, but I pulled out of both of those after talking with David Osborne and some other mentors about, hey, what should we be doing now? And the answer being, you should just basically try to save as much cash as you can and hold your breath till maybe January 1st before you start spending again as far as investment wise. So that's kind of what I'm doing now. We've changed I started GoBundance with David and a couple other guys. Um, and in 6 years, it's grown to 225 members. And we've shifted our model where before it was, more of like an event sort of company. And now it's become like a Zoom sort of company. We have Zoom calls every night pretty much, and guests on Zoom, and that's actually been taking time. I had my podcast, which I sold, um, and sold at the end of the year. Thank God I sold it in November. I just and that was just I just wasn't happy doing it. I mean, I was happy doing it in the beginning. I loved like the first 100 interviews, but when I got to 850, it was kind of just I just didn't enjoy it anymore. It just was like, oh man, I gotta talk to. I mean, I love talking to agents like this and everything, but this is I can control, right? I mean, if they interviewed 5 agents in a day, back to back, and they say the same cliches about um, SOI and stuff like that. I just, after 850 episodes, I said I want to sell it, so I sold it, and I was lucky. I got cash for it, and I got out, and I was very relieved. And so now I'm kind of just waiting for the universe to see where I go next. But it's been fine. I live in Folly Beach, South Carolina. I also have another house in Columbia, Maryland, that my wife and I go to for the summers because it gets so hot here. We just bought like a little rancher and rehabbed it, and we just leave it empty during the basically about 8 months a year. We leave it empty, and then we just go to it. And my mom lives there, my dad lives there, a couple of my siblings live there, and all our high school friends and crap like that live there. So we kind of scratch that itch over the summers, and then we come to Folly Beach and we just
Nice.
kind of cool out.
So obviously, listening to your story, I mean, you created a path where you have choices. And choices means financial freedom. What advice would you give, a younger agent or mid-career agent? Obviously, this is a real test. I mean, what Gary Keller said this on a Zoom call that I was on. It was a mastermind yesterday, that recessions reveal, and they reveal health, mindset, financial, your systems, your tools. So you've positioned yourself in a way that you have choices. And what advice would you give for someone who's still hand to mouth in terms of building net worth and cash flow or passive income?
I mean, what my advice is going to be cliches, but I'm going to give it anyways. It's just be very conscious of your leverage. People look, people get screwed up in recessions based on leverage, meaning they borrow too much or their expenses are too high. And do you really need a car? My daughter got rid of her car. She didn't have a car. She hadn't had a car in like 2.5 years, but it saves her tons of money, right? Do you really need? I mean, as an agent, you need a car. That's dumb, but let's say, I guess the point is just be aware of your expenses, be aware of what you're saving. Try to save between now and the end of the year. Set a saving goal. I don't even care if it's $1,000. Set a goal to save a certain amount of money by now and the end of the year, um, just to have in cash until the day you die. Um, now is a great time to work even harder. You can be so much more efficient now too with Zoom and with people expecting you to be home and expecting you to do video calls and things like that. And you know, that would be my advice during this.
Double down.
Double down. Just be aggressive. And the agents are, I think there's going to be fallout. I think you're going to have agents that just get out of business. They're going to, it's going to come around and you're going to be like, oh, you got to pay $1,000 in dues, or, you got to re-up or whatever your fees are. And they're just going to be like, nah, I'm good. Just put me in referrals. So I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity to take business that somebody else is, if you just are just aggressive and right-minded and thinking about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I think the market, everywhere, everybody I talk to, all the agents that I talk to, and I know a million agents, trust me, they all tell me that, things are good, and the demand is still massive. And then hopefully when this is all over, that demand is just going to continue. I mean, what are you feeling?
Yeah, same thing. We're still knocking down deals. We're just more cautious, and occupied homes are harder to list because of the complications of showings and that part of it. But our agents are as active as, day in and out. We're on Zoom calls every day. I feel more connected to the community than I ever have. It's almost the opposite of what you'd expect, just because the nature of this experience versus 2009, 10, 8, 10, 9, those years where it was more economic, less, health related. So everyone wants to act right. And when I say act right, I just mean stay productive and contributory to their databases. At one point, you said you had 50 people operating inside of your domain with multiple streams of income, lending and other title and real estate. What does it look like to attract talent? Obviously, you had to have talent serving and working. What do you consider the number one reason you're able to attract that number and have the results you did?
Yeah, it was interesting. Now, I've never really thought about it in this sense, but the most talented people on my team were the ones that I hired early on. I think the ones that I like what happened was, like, in the beginning when I was building a team, like nobody else had teams, right? So it wasn't like people would call you and say, hey, I want to be part of the Pat Hiban real estate group, because no one even knew what it was or had it. You know what I mean? It just didn't happen. So I actually had to recruit them and be like, hey, dude, I saw you sold, 15 houses, and, I think with me, you could sell 30. And those ended up being the best agents, the ones that I actually recruited and sought out and thought, like, I would do several agents I would have transactions with, and I'd see them at settlement, and I would just know, right? They would just ask stuff like, let me see this payoff statement, right? This doesn't look right. Why are you charging them 12 days interest? It's only, you only need to escrow, you don't need to save 2 days interest. Why are you doing this? What, I could just tell they were sharp, and I'm like, this agent is sharp. I'm going to stay in touch with them. And that's kind of how I built my whole core team. I think it wasn't till I got really big and agents started calling me and saying, oh, wow, I heard this is a really cool place to work. And I want to be part of you, that I started getting less quality. I've never really thought about this actually until right now, this minute. But yeah, like the last 10 agents I hired sucked, right? They were terrible. They were good for the market. They still sold 20 houses a year because the market was so good, but they were really bad. Like, they're not in existence today. The first 5 agents that I ever hired are all still active agents. And my team is, shut down. I don't have a license anymore. So they're still active and they're still very successful. And I think that maybe the lesson in that is that you have to, if you're building your team, you should build it with people that you seek out, right? That you're like, I would love to have them on my team. They would do better. I would do better. Be a win-win.
Yeah, that's great advice. That's great advice. Um, so with your podcast, and then I want to migrate into some of the steps in your book, 6 Steps to 7 Figures. But in fact, let's do that next, and then we'll bounce to just some experiences with 850 speakers and maybe some wisdom that came from that, or your most unique experience, just as closing entertainment. So you've got these 6 steps to 7 figures. I get what inspired you to write it, and what did that look like? And then share a little, maybe some nuggets from each chapter or an element of that you'd want to give us today.
It's kind of like, yeah, it's a great question, right? It's kind of like everything in my life. Like I don't think really like, I mean, I set goals and I know generally what I want, but I don't know like exactly how I'm gonna get it. Right? It's kind of like you want money, but you don't know how you're gonna get there. But if someone with money tells you some advice, you should do it. Um, so um, so it's like I wanted to write a book. I just felt like I've always had some creativity, right? I've journaled since I was like 22 years old. I've always felt that part of me has been artistic. Um, so I've always wanted to write a book. So I actually wrote a book about being a boss. And I took it to Jay Papasan, and he was like, nah. He was like, you don't, there's a million books about being a boss, right? And your experience in being a boss, well, you've got 50 people or whatever, but, you know, a lot of our success and the reason I could keep my employees to say, oh, I love you and I love working for you was because we had so much money coming in. It was so many commissions. And of course, you're going to be like, yeah, party. It's great to work for Pat Hiban. So, anyways, he said, what people really want to know is about you. He said, you need to go back and write another book. So I basically scrapped it. I couldn't even tell you where that thing is, right? It was huge. It was called Boss You Rock. and and then and so he says people want to learn about you. So he recommended a book ghostwriter for me, and she interviewed me every day, Tuesday and Thursday for like 6 months, maybe a year. And then it took me 4 years after she put together she finalized the process, but the whole thing took 4 years. So by that time, the market had crashed and I had even more content. And then it was ready, like 2010, 2011, I think is when it came out. And so it was good. It was perfect timing. And that's what happened. And basically, and then I wrote this huge chronological thing that was like 400 pages. And again, I took it to Jay Papasan, and Jay was like, here's the problem. It's too big. You want to make it an airplane read. You want to make it so somebody could take a flight and finish it. You know what I mean? But when they finish their flight. So I took this long chronological story of my life, and he said, try to break it down into like the top things. So I broke it down into basically 6 things. And then I just it's not chronological, but I was able to take and put things in 6 different buckets as to what were basically the 6 things that I did, not only with building a huge listing business, building a huge team, building a foreclosure business that I didn't have any foreclosure listings, building $1 million home division, which I didn't have any $1 million homes. So you could take it to building a podcast of 5 million downloads, building abundance. Everything I've done, has been a building process, basically where I've used the same exact 6 steps.
So you want to maybe just give us a nugget from, setting goals and affirmations, and what do you think the inspired takeaway there would be?
Well, I think that, it was interesting. I don't know if you were there. I think you were on that call with the basketball player that was deaf a couple of days ago, but this guy was intense, man. He said that he wrote out his goals of what he wanted to do, and as far as rebounds and shots, 3 points, and free throws in the NBA, and he put his goals underneath his light switch. And every time he flipped on his light switch in the morning, he would have to read his goals. And when he hit the light switch down, he had to read his goals before he hit it down. And I kind of did the same thing and still do, very goal oriented. I put in here, like, if you could see this, these certain goals,
Yep.
different years that I've set them, and then affirmations that I turned them into. So I've always set big goals like, oh, I want to be a millionaire. And then the small goal, which would be, okay, if I want to be a millionaire, what do I got to do on a daily basis? Well, I got to save $5 a day. Sounds simple, but most people just say, I want to be a millionaire. And then they never set the daily goal down. So they never save any money. So they never get there. It doesn't make any logical sense. So I save $5 a day. I save $5 a day. Or if it's like, if it's, you want to do 35 transactions, well, and you only did 15 a year before, you need to do something different on a daily basis. I call 10 past clients a day, and speak to them on the phone. I hand out 10 business cards a day. I call 10 expireds a day, or maybe all three of those things, right? The more daily goals you put down as your goals and then affirm them that you in fact do them, the more they're going to happen, and then the more the bigger goal is going to manifest.
Yep. That makes perfect sense. How do you deal with, so if you set a big goal, sounds like you're the type, and I think I know you well enough to know, you set huge goals and then you throw the ball deep and then you just start running. And I know life derails and, things happen and failure. And how do you over that mental battle for chasing a big goal?
Yeah, it is, right? I think that some of it is a naivety, is just being daft enough to like chase that ball, right? And be like, you're never going to catch that. Why are you running for it? But yeah, I mean, and I think some of that is some of that is forced, right? It's like, oh, I don't deserve that, like imposter syndrome, which I still get, to be honest with you. Sometimes I'm like, how did I get here? I'm still a 15-year-old kid. Why is this? Why am I here? But I think that the way to help with that is and believe me, we all have it. I mean, if you look at like the psychological studies of the average American kid, and I think it's even worse in like Russia and Poland and shit like that, but it's basically the average American kid um, is told no 11 times, or a negative statement 11 times for every one positive, which means like a 2-year-old kid, don't touch that, don't be nice, don't hit your sister, get back here, something negative, rather than you're a smart kid, good job, you're going to be rich someday, you're eloquent, you're a good reader, whatever. It's 11 to 1. So we kind of, by the time we're 18, it's no wonder that we have these belief structures that we don't deserve to be millionaires, that we don't deserve to be the top agent in the office, that we don't deserve this, right? That we're in belief. But the reality of it is that there's nothing really that separates successful agents from unsuccessful agents. You look at them and they're so diversified, and you cannot, like, if you lined up 10 agents in a row, all dressed the same, there's no way you'd be able to pick out who's the most successful one. And so like it all has to do with that belief structure, right? It doesn't have to do with how they were born or something. So so the way that I did it was through the affirmations and through just working on my subconscious mind, right? I was 21 years old when I got into business. I had to start thinking like, I'm the top agent in the office. I'm the top agent in the office. I sell, 50 homes a year. I sell 50 homes a year. I call 5 people a day. I call 5 people a day. I had to be that. Or I think that I would let all my upbringing just sink in to where I'd be like, hey, I'm only 20 at that time, 24. I think at the one company after I took the Floyd Wickman, I did become the #1 agent in that office. and I was only like 24 years old. So like, and if I didn't coach myself every single day, to believe that, to answer your question, that mental toughness, that naivety, that ability to just run towards the ball without thinking, I would have never made it, right? Because I was 24 and I looked like I was 21. I was so young looking, and I mean, the average agent at that time was like 48. You know what I mean? I mean, there was a huge generation gap back then as far as agents.
Yeah.
So,
Your average client was at least a decade older than you. I mean,
at least. And when I started doing listings, they were like 2 or 3 decades older.
yeah, I get that. I remember starting at 30. I looked 20 years old, and it's all, I just dressed for success. So that at least I wouldn't be underestimated.
I did that too. I would always wear, a tie, and, my nickname in the office was Niles. It was like a character in Kramer, his brother, who was like really uptight because he always wore like a suit. He would go like even on a Saturday and Sunday. And anyways, so yeah, I would do that same thing too. I had an agent, Eric, that worked for me that looked really young, and he got personality glasses. He got glasses that didn't even have like real lenses in them, just to make him look older and more professional.
Yeah, awesome. As a reminder, guys, if you have questions, I see Shannon dropped one. We'll hit that in just a minute. Throw questions up in the comments. I'm happy to scan through them and pull some of your personal questions into the conversation too. I always had a mantra, Pat. It was, if it's to be, why not me? And it was just a saying I would tell myself. And every day I wake up, and just like you, man, we're humans having human experiences. And if, we're one crisis away from being dropped to our knees. Let's get real. And the ability to just stand back up and own that, you know what, that wasn't permanent. That wasn't personal. I'm going to keep swinging. And it's almost like you have to get okay with failure and okay with not being perfect, because perfect's impossible. And so I appreciate your story. I just read an article actually about Kobe and Kobe Bryant. And it just said the first thing that had to happen for him to excel, I think his first, game, he scored 0 points as an 11-year-old and went home deflated and defeated. And his dad told him it would be okay. And that no matter what, he was loved. So part of this is kind of a self-love story that, hey, I'm here to go and grow. And if it's happening for me and not to me. So thanks for leading us down that path. That was super genuine and awesome. How about favorite mentors? Because clearly at 22, you mentioned journaling. I don't know many 22-year-olds that journal regularly. Where did that come from? And who are your early mentors, and maybe your favorite today?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of how that happened. So I must have been looking because, so I remember the time, I think I was about 23, 22. Yeah. And I remember there was a loan officer actually who, I think his name was Michael, and he had just come off like a 10-year career at Amway. I don't even know about Amway, but it's very
Multi-level, yeah.
Multi-level, and it's very methodical. You go, they teach you stuff, and you know what I mean. You learn. It's very learning based, and he was now a mortgage officer, and he started bringing me books. Like he brought me As a Man Thinketh, which is still to this day one of my favorite books by James Allen. He brought me, the classics, How to Win Friends and Influence People, and Think and Grow Rich and stuff. And then I think that he had mentioned journaling, and I also think in Floyd Wickman in Sweat Hogs, he mentioned journaling. Or somehow, I don't know how, but somehow I started writing. And I used to be much more sporadic. Like I literally still have them, and I look back through them from time to time. And I might have written in my first one. I might have gotten 2 years in one little journal. You know what I mean? I might have took a journal like this and took like 2 years to get through it. But now I blast through these big journals in like 4 months.
So what do you get from it? What do you see? What's the value, and why should everyone adopt that habit?
Well, Anthony Robbins says if life is worth living, then life is worth recording. And I think that, do I have hope that my kids will read them? No, I don't know if they will or not, but I kind of think maybe my grandkids or my great grandkids or some kid in my lineage is going to be like, let me see what great grandpa Wiggy is about, and that's what they call me, and I'm like, and so yet at the same time, for me, I think it's very therapeutic. Like I've been journaling now like crazy with this COVID, right? I'm like, day 42, day 43, like, because I think it's interesting to go back and look at that. And I've actually gone back like to the first day I met. So my business partners in GoBundance, who I started with, are David Osborne, who is Althea's son, who's like the fifth agent, Keller Williams, and Tim Rode. And I went back to those two guys to the day that I met them each, like 20 years ago. I met David, and it's like, so I met this guy named David, and I just wrote stuff about him. And I went back and I looked at it, and it's just fascinating. I just think it's like, well, that is so cool, because I couldn't have,
Yeah.
recorded that or taken a picture or something. It's just awkward, right? So it's like, you just never know where, if something's an important moment or it's not, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I enjoy it. I think it's a way for me to be artistic. It's a way for me to be, um, it's therapy for me, and it is also a recording device for my life. And truth be told, a lot of my success is built on the journaling, and that's where I build stuff. Like I will build, like if I say, okay, well, I got to take um, the Tribe of Millionaires book to the next level, or I got to open up a $1 million home division for my team. I'll take it and journal it out. Step one is this. Let's try this. Let's try this. Let's try this. Let's try this. Then the next day I'll look at it and I'll say, that's wrong. Let's do it this way. The next day I'll look at it and say, okay, here's what's going to happen. So I've like built it like an architect would design a house in the journal first, and then manifest it second. But I think if I'm not writing it down, it's all just thoughts in my head that are conflicting. And if I have it written down, it actually helps with the process. It's like kind of like an architect designing a house in his head without putting it down on a piece of paper, you know?
Well, you free up space too for other thoughts and experiences inside of your mind. I was blessed to hang out with an author, and I'm drawing a blank on his name, but I'll type it in or later. But he wrote a book on the power of words and communication, and I didn't realize he was an author. We were on one of these trips with Diana Kokoska, her big once a year, high-minded, big thinker trips. And we were in San Francisco. He jumped on a bus next to me and started asking me about my experiences. And it was really cool he was so intentional with his questions. And at the end of it, I'm like, what do you do? Like, it was obvious he was somebody on a mission at one point. He's like, and he even said this, he goes, hey, he'd ask me a question, I'd answer, and occasionally would honor me with, that was brilliant or something, which probably wasn't brilliant, but it wasn't stupid. And he would like, I want to write that down because that's relevant, and I'd like to keep that. And I thought, that's where I think I caught on. I'm like, so what do you do? And he's like, oh, I'm the keynote tomorrow at our big event. I'm like, I gotcha. And he said, I believe that there are two books that you should always carry with you. One is the one you're reading, and one's the one you're writing.
Oh, yeah.
So I thought that's one of the more profound things I've heard. And journaling is really just a path to scripting your story in your book. And I think, a life worth living is one that's scripted and has some, the ability to go back and like you said, future generations at least document some of the challenges and opportunities. So speaking of challenges and opportunities, biggest failure and what you learned, I don't think I threw this on the list, but.
Well, I've had some failures of investments and things, but I think that's kind of out of my control, right? It's like part of the game. You win some, you lose some. It's all gambling, right? But the biggest failure, I think, regarding like my business that I had control over, two things that I look back now. There were ways when I downsized, I fired 22 people in 1 year. There were ways that I handled that I probably could have handled better. One of my agents from like 12 years ago reached out to me on Facebook recently. I hadn't heard from her in a long time. She's doing great. She moved to Connecticut from Maryland, and she's got a family and everything. And uh, we were talking about, we're reminiscing, what happened to this person, what happened to that person. There were a couple of people that I was like, well, I haven't heard from them because they're mad at me because of the way it went down. They didn't think that they should be laid off instead of this person being laid off or whatever, based on age or tenure and stuff. And I think back on it and I said, yep, yeah, we probably were a little too big for our britches in the way we treated people. Yet the bigger lesson was how I treated um, my finances. And I write about this in a book. I had this super duper copier that, like, I mean, we were doing 500 to 1,000 postcards a day, mailing them out from this super copier. We had a marketing team of like 4 people, just listed, just sold, stuff like that. And then when everything stopped, literally stopped, like the spigot just turned off. Like, we were doing 41 settlements a month on average, and then we went to like 12. You know what I mean? And it's like, okay, well, we can't afford to have this printer. We don't need this printer. We can just outsource postcards. But it was too late. I had signed like a 7-year lease on this thing, and it's like $1,000 a month or something ridiculous. So I got stuck with a printer for the longest time. I got stuck with this lease that I signed personally for, and then I had to sublease it. I actually we had 8,300 square feet, and we only, at the end, we're using like 1,200, 1,500 of that. And so I started subleasing offices to many companies, but the rents they were paying me was like 40% of the rent I was paying.
Mm.
And so my lesson in that, and the failure in that, is overcommitting. Like, you should always do whatever you can not to sign personally for stuff. Always sign in a business name. Um, and not to overcommit on long terms. If you can get a 3-year term on things, or a 2-year or 1 year. Yeah, I'm talking about even like contracts you sign with Zillow and Realtor.com and stuff like that. You guys should really be doing this. Minimum is month to month, whenever you can. Even if it costs you a little bit more money, it's always worth it, because you never know when you want to cancel it. And I made some big mistakes and just thinking it would last forever, and of course it didn't. And people are starting to feel that now, right?
Yeah,
So
on a dime.
yeah.
Yeah, things can change quick. Thanks for sharing that. So I did get a question about, Shannon asked, I would love to hear what you'd advise a 52-year-old person who's new and a single mother with middle school kids. What would you focus on in first steps given the shift with so much distraction?
Okay, so that's a great question. You have opportunity there in that you have a built-in network with middle schoolers, um, and you're the parent, meaning I would double down on your whole parenting thing. Like, I see that as opportunity. Like, when you go to sports games or soccer games or whatever it is, right? If your kids are into music or whatever your kids are into, you know, be like the super parent where you're like there, and then everybody knows you, right? As Vicky's mom or Cindy's mom, and let everyone know that you're a real estate agent. And there's a huge network. I mean, I sold hundreds of houses to parents of my kids when they were growing up. My wife was in a mom's group. We always had parties at our house. Uh, Whenever the opportunity for a slumber party, we said, have everybody come here, because number one, we felt safer. Our kids were at our house in our control. But number two, we got to know the parents because they would drop the kids off. You know what I mean? And then I always let them know I was an agent. They always knew me, and I really worked that network. And then especially the high school, volunteer for all kinds of stuff. But when you do it, just let them know, you know, that you're an agent. You gotta let them know that you're an agent. You gotta be obnoxious. You gotta be like, here's my card. Here's my card. Hey, you mind if I leave these business cards at the front desk? Tacking up your card on the cork board. Double down. In the book, I talk about building step 5, build, and I think I talk a little bit about. I did 2 things. I sold a cop a house, and I totally got into the cop network, and I started, you know, saying, oh, I sold Daryl Thompson a house. I sold Officer such and such a house. And I started building up more and more cops. And then same thing with teachers. I started selling more and more teachers. And whenever somebody said, Mrs. McKenzie wants to buy a house, I would immediately let Mrs. McKenzie know that I sold a house with Mrs. Bloomstein and Mrs. Jones. Even if I knew they didn't know them, they might have heard their names even if they were at different schools, just to make it like I was the teacher guy and I was a cop guy. And I think you can do that as like you are the agent for them, no matter what the group is.
Yeah, social credibility is strong, and just proving that their network trusted you implies trustworthiness. So that's brilliant. And being the source, like even right now where we're not able to go to ball games in the short term, hopefully, but maybe being the source of information or connectivity or Zoom, or how do you get everybody linked up and synced up, and not necessarily with the overt purpose of real estate, but eventually the conversation evolves to it, and then not being a secret agent. I think that was great advice. Secret agents die a broke, painful career death, right?
Yeah, you could do a Zoom of like chess moms, kids that play chess, or whatever moms it is, just to get to know each other. There's a guy that I live on Folly Beach. There's an agent that lives on Folly Beach, and he does a Wednesday happy hour. Get to know your neighbors on Zoom. I mean, why not, right?
Yeah. So your network is your net worth. You've probably heard that said, or equals. And I know that you co-started GoBundance. Tell us what inspired that, and maybe a quick overview of what it is or how it evolved.
Yeah, so it's kind of funny. Like David and Tim and I all had a mind for investing. Like we were all of the belief that you should work until your investments pay your bills, right? And the whole goal in life, it's the Robert Kiyosaki way, right? Like you invest in stuff. So we always had that, and we always also had the concept of you should set these massive goals and constantly talk about them and stuff like that. So we also love to travel. So for years we traveled together. We were like our game buddies, right? Like you couldn't find anybody else to go to Romania with you. So we're like, hey, let's go to Romania, stuff like that. And so we did it. And then, maybe 7 years ago, people started saying, hey, well, I want to come with you guys. So then we went to Spain, went to Tomato Fight in Spain, and did the world's biggest food fight. And like six of us went. And then we went and hiked Mount Whitney, and 10 of us went. And then we're like, more and more people started going. So we're like, hey, maybe we should make this official and start charging people for it and make it like a real thing. And that's the true story. That's how it happened. And now there's 200 some members, and and now it's much more organized, but it's basically the same thing, just with more people. We talk about the same stuff that we were talking about 20 years ago when David and I met. The speakers that getting on Zoom today are exactly the same sort of mindset of the speakers David and I would talk about and read about 20 years ago.
Yeah. Well, there's also an accountability piece, as I recall, that early on you guys would call each other out for your goals and your behavior,
right,
that we're supposed to align with those goals. And that's built into the DNA of GoBundance today. I have a GoPod. I'm a member of the group, and it's become my favorite network to go to for feedback, for counsel, for just a soundboard, because there's so many go-getters in that environment. Not that everyone should join that group, but there are, there's a family version of it called Fambundance. And then there's a women's group, I don't, for women, they're starting that. But it's an amazing network. But I have a once a week call for 30 minutes with they call it a GoPod, POD. And there's 4 of us on the call, and man, we just set short-term 1 week goals, and we talk about some long-term challenges too. But what a gift that is, once a week. And it's not your next door neighbor or the person next to you in the office. It's somebody from around the country that's got a unique perspective. How did that impact you, having those 3 guys, or 2 guys particular, that pushed you?
Yeah, well, that's a key. If you could find people to push you and to keep you accountable, it just helps you be so much more authentic, and it also plays the, the 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 place of a coach. You know what I mean? It's like built-in coaches. Um, the it's everything. It's everything. It's kind of like, well, if you're going to go on a diet and not tell anybody, it's probably not going to work. But if you go on a diet and tell 10 people, and then also 2 of those people are aggressive enough and love you enough that they're going to be like, Rick, how's the diet? Every week or whatever, then your chances of being so much more successful happen. So it's just common sense, right? I mean, if you look at and again, I'm going to the diet thing because it's universal, but if you look at Weight Watchers, there's a reason why Weight Watchers works, because they make you come in and stand on a scale or register your weight, and they also make you count the amount of calories you eat every day. If you eat a peanut M&M, you have to write it down. It's accountability. As soon as you stop writing it down and stop weighing yourself, you gain weight. So the accountability is part of the equation that you can't take out, right? So if you set a goal and then you have the accountability part, that's the formula for success.
Absolutely. So yeah, take that to heart, everybody. If you don't have someone inspecting, what you expect and want from life, you're probably going to let yourself off the hook. And sometimes I find we do things for other people we won't do for ourselves. The proverbial story of a fellow that has a heart attack and changes all of his ways. Often it's because he wants to live long enough to enjoy grandkids or great grandkids, or it's not just a selfish endeavor. So think about that. What inspires and motivates you to create a big goal, throw the ball deep, chase it, and not let yourself off the hook, but still be kind enough, not to judge yourself in a debilitating way. And so I've heard all of that today shared. So thanks. How about 850 podcasts with some of the brightest and best, regardless of the redundancy? Who was your favorite and why? And maybe a nugget or 2 from that experience.
Wow. Well, that's a tough one, right? Because I got so many agents, half of them. They're gonna be like, "Why did you pick me as your favorite?" I'm gonna say my favorite was the worst one. The one that got the most YouTube comments was what
You don't have to share the name.
Tracy Tudor. No, it's public. Tracy Tudor. So I did Tracy Tudor, who was on $1 Million Listing LA, and she got on. I have the exact same questions I asked everybody, and the reason that my audience was so good was because I asked them what their net profit is, and I asked them for their numbers first. I'm like, how many houses did you sell? What's your volume? What's your average sale price? What is your profit margin? And everybody answered. And people love that, because so much of agents, you can make $500 grand a year and spend $550. Easy in this business, easy. So she didn't know what she was getting. I did send her the questions ahead of time, but she went and she thought she muted me, but she didn't mute me. And then she turned to her assistant and she said, "Who the F is this? This effing guy doesn't know who I am. He clearly has not done his homework. you know, this is a disaster. And an assistant said, you're not muted. And she comes back on, it was videotaped too. And I said, hey, you're not muted, but we can keep going. Don't worry about it, and then she's like, this is ridiculous. And she basically chewed me out, and then she hung up on me. So, so then I was like, oh, so I showed it to a couple people, and I'm like, oh, what do I do with this? Like, it's like 6 minutes long, right? I'm like, oh, what do I do with this? This is kind of funny. And I showed it to like 5 people. I was at an event with like Hal Elrod and David Osborne, Mike McCarthy, people that I look up to. I showed it to them. They all said, you got to release it. So I released it as episode 800. It's 6 minutes long. She never sued me, knock on wood. She never, I never heard from her. I think that it's like part of her image, that she wanted to be like the mean lady. So so she let it go, or I don't know, she didn't care. I had a sleepless night. I thought I was gonna get in trouble for it, but everybody, I even talked to a lawyer, and they're like, you did nothing wrong.
Yeah.
She's
Well, she made that bet, right?
She knew she
So
was
note to self: if you're going to show up on Pat's show, be ready with your numbers.
yeah.
And know where your mute button is if you decide to unleash it.
How many times you drill that, and the agent said, know your numbers, know your numbers. Why
Yeah.
not act? She
Well,
didn't know. She didn't know like how many houses she sold. She didn't know what her average sale price was. She knew, didn't want to disclose it.
Well, those are like gauges in your car, man. If you don't watch your gauges, man, at some point your motor blows up. I mean, you got to know. And that's just a core tenet for financial and fiscal success. So we're out of time. We've got just one last super quick question. What best piece of advice you've ever received? What would you?
That's crazy. I should.
Or you could just share one last nugget of wisdom, something you've along the way just gone, this is what really matters and to me, and what qualifies as a life worth living.
That's interesting that okay, so the one thing I remember from As a Man Thinketh, one of my favorite quotes in As a Man Thinketh is, you cannot constantly dream within and stand still without. And I think it goes back to what we were talking about before. If you're dreaming within, if you're journaling, if you're writing down your goals, if you're constantly dreaming within, right? You can't stand still without. You can't, like, go back to, again, the simple thing. If you want to have $1 million, right? If you're writing down every day, I save $5, I save $5, either you're going to quit and you're going to burn that journal, right? And then you're going to be broke. Or eventually you're going to say, like, I'm a false prophet. I keep writing this down, and I need to start saving. And then you're going to save, and then you're going to have $1 million. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
you will manifest it if you just don't quit and you dream about it every day. So I'll leave with that one.
That's phenomenal wisdom. Pat, you're a gentleman and a scholar and a good friend, and I'm so grateful for your time with us today. So kudos to you, and thanks to everyone that joined us, and keep up the good fight. Thanks a bunch.
Thanks, Rick. You asked great questions, and you're a great host. It was very easy for me to just come here and just chat. So thanks.
Well, you hit the mark. Thank you, my friend. Take care. See you soon.